Welcome to our podcast. We will discuss 6 novels from 6 different continents of the world. The first book that we're going to discuss is
The Magician, which is a young adult fantasy novel by Lev Grossman, which follows the life of Quentin Goldwater as from the age of 17 through early 20s. And we will follow him from when he started going into a magic school and then later into out in the real world, and we will discuss the different themes that comes up in the book.
So what are some of the themes that we can identify? It's a coming of age novel, obviously. Kind of a transition from teens into young adults, and we get to follow them for about 5 years, if I'm not mistaken.
4 years, something like that.
Yeah, so through college and into adulthood.
Yeah.
And it kind of has an interesting combination of magic in regards to mental illness as well. And
And this is, if we want to connect it to this continent, which is North America, we can see that this is a quite common take on the coming of age novel in America. You take some magic and add it in, and then you kind of mirror reality and teen life in the magic.
So we're going to start with our first theme would be mental illness, which we'll discuss, because our main character, well, one of the main characters, Quentin, struggles with depression
throughout the entire
novel, but most significantly prior and then after he's come into contact with magic.
And we also see how that affects his friendships and his relationship.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so how is this depicted, do you think, in the novel with the magic and the plot? How is kind of the magic used to depict this for the audience, which is teens?
Something that I realized in the book is that he uses magic was some kind of addiction for him. When he found about it, he got very addicted to it in some way, and then when he goes out into the real world, we see him using drugs and alcohol to deal with his emotions, and more specifically his depression. And basically what we see him here is how many people deal with their emotions is by using some kind of substance.
You kind of use magic, which can be a bit easier to read about in a book than just drugs. If you're young, it's easier to reach people with that kind of story, but actually maybe the magic is just working as a drug to show something about the drug.
But I also think that as I was reading the book, it was like watching a teen search for something more, and then he finds it and he thinks that it's going to be this cure-all to everything, and then the realization going from this childhood kind of being naive, thinking that there is a cure-all for everything, and that's kind of what he realizes. He thinks that magic is going to solve everything, but after a while he realizes that it's just
I even remember he was I can't remember the quote really, but he was saying I thought the magic was enough, but it wasn't, and then he was in a relationship with Alice, and he thought I thought Alice was going to be enough for me, and then when they graduate, he realizes she isn't enough for him.
So it's kind of this childish sense that you think that there's going to be something materialistic or something like an objective kind of a thing that's going to make you happy, or that is going to give you all the answers, but there really isn't. And I think that's kind of what magic symbolizes, that realization that we all come to at some point.
And when we come back to the topic of depression, in the US, 1 of 5 adults experience some kind of depression.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
even more. I think, when we think about the dark numbers and all of that. Absolutely. So I don't know. I think the book is really helpful. I think. Do you guys think that it's executed properly? Do you think that it has the effect that was meant? Does it illustrate it properly, so to say?
In which way?
Just how it's written. Do you think it's accurate to young? Can you relate to it?
Okay, yeah, in some ways I can relate to it. Like, something that I found very interesting about this book is I didn't really like any of the characters.
Oh, yeah.
Which doesn't happen very often. You always, when you read a book, it's like, oh,
you always connect with one of them.
You like, oh, okay, so this is the nice character. But in this book, they were all like in the same level of being nice or mean to each other.
Oh, yeah.
So you didn't really have a favorite character, but you didn't like them all, but you didn't hate them or love them. And you can like imagine that these people could actually exist, because in real life you maybe have a friend, you like them, but they do something annoying which makes you kind
it's
of
more complex.
Yeah,
just like
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which I think this book do really well.
Yeah. What do you think?
I agree with that, because a lot of the times, especially these kind of fantasy books, they will have a hero and then a very clear antagonist and then some supporting characters, and this book doesn't. So it really uses magic in a different way from what a lot of books do. The magic isn't there for itself; it's there to show something else.
Yeah.
I think it's just very interesting how I think it accurately illustrates how we think of the world when we're kids, because prior to that he had two best friends, and that was a stable relationship.
And it's very the simplistic view of that. Yeah. One thing, like the magic or my girlfriend or whatever, is going to fix everything, but also those things give him negative consequences.
But just like in the contrast of his prior life, so to speak, before he came to college, was very like calm. He had his group of friends, he knew everything that was needed to know. Yeah. And then he gets to college, and first of all, these complex relationships, the depression starts kicking in a different way than prior, as well as the situations they run into. I was like, so I think it's very like accurate in its conduction, and I think that it's well written, I would say.
Yeah, I think also too. And when I also was thinking, he had some issues with his parents, which is something many teenagers and young adults experience, which can be also a reason why he has so many. He had a problem with his mental
illness.
With his mental illness, which could be a reason why. Yeah,
of course. It brings up a lot of themes, and you look at the cover and you're like, okay, it's just a fantasy novel. Yeah. And then you start reading it, it's more complex.
That can also be a way to get readers that wouldn't normally pick up a book and like, this is about depression. No. And that will open up to readers that wouldn't normally find it.
It has a lot more substance than just.
But also what you mentioned with the parents, in that way it conforms a lot to other books about depression or other mental illnesses, because a lot in literature and in film, when a character has mental illness, it's usually because of family problems, and that's not always not always true, and that's something it conforms to.
Next topic we want to talk about is relationships. We kind of started talking about it, but also the fact that he cheats on his girlfriend. Yeah. The main relationship that we see throughout this novel is broken apart so abruptly, which is very interesting as well, with the love and hate of characters.
And we saw also like a little bit from Alice's point of view, his girlfriend, like how it affected her. Yeah, she like made her really. She couldn't trust him, and she dies later in the book, which really kind of destroys Quentin in some way. Yeah.
It's also very interesting to you grow up and you realize that relationships aren't as easy as you think they are. You realize that infidelity will occur, and then you can cheat on somebody and still love them, and just that complex issue. Very interesting.
Yeah, it's a very gray area, and this book showed it really well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he didn't just like cheat on her because, he kind of was also drunk and had taken some drugs, or I think it just was alcohol, I can't remember really. But that affected him and cheat on her, which isn't really an excuse, but like still we could like see how depression and then the alcohol added to that and ruined his relationship. The
because
only thing that
you think of infidelity and you're like, oh, it's wrong. Then in this kind of like context, you can kind of see how other factors contributed to it. You can to some extent justify how it happened, not why, but like how, and understand it.
And he also had his friends, which were actually the people who kind of, in my opinion, they were a bit toxic. Yeah. Because they were the one that made him start taking the drugs. And they weren't really someone there that said to him that was wrong. I mean, like Alice, I think tried once or twice, but she didn't really try that hard. And she was also a bit distanced from him, and she was still thinking a lot about magic, and was very scholarly, doing scholarly stuff. And he was just not there mentally.
And that has kind of a lot to do with just like the feeling of being alone. You have like this group pulling you towards something bad, and then you have another group that's distancing itself from you. Yeah. So it kind of discusses like where the responsibility lies in those kind of situations, which is really interesting. You know, when you hear about somebody overdosing, do you think about the person that's overdosing or the person that supplied them with the drugs for it? So it's kind of like, where does the line of responsibility go?
Yeah, and bringing us back to like North America and seeing like I think I don't really have the numbers right now, but I think North America is like one of the places that substance abuse come because of depression, and how that have ruined many families and relationships, and yeah.
So, if you think about the age group for this book, because we were talking about the cover prior, we were like, oh, it looks like a very just like typical like Harry Potter-ish, kind of like, it looks like J.K. Rowling has written it. Yeah. But what would you say the age group is suitable for reading?
I don't think it's,
because it discusses a lot of adult themes.
Yeah, I like when I was in the beginning of the book, I was like, this sounds like a YA book, like young adult book. But then like when they get older and older, I was like, I don't think this is very suitable for very very young teenagers to be introduced to. It was very dark.
It was very dark. And when does that transition occur? You know, in real life, does it occur around 17, 16?
I would say so.
Is that like when you're mature enough to deal with those concepts?
Yeah, I would say so, because I think during that age so much is going on, and it can be it's so easy to get into depression, anxiety, like eating disorders, all these mental illnesses. And I think being introduced to it in similar other, like in this book, I think is a good way.
But this book doesn't really have a happy ending, so you can't really say that it's a solution to anything. It's more of a explanation, like this is how it can go down.
Yeah. Which is interesting. And also we need to remember this is like the first book in a trilogy, series. And we only have read the first book, so from what I heard, it gets better. Okay. Yeah. I don't know I don't know really how, in which way it gets better, but yeah.
Do you want to add anything? I think that's a no.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I thought it was really interesting, and now we're going to move on. The next episode will be on another book, which we will return. You'll get the title for the next episode, because we're not really sure yet. But yeah, it was a really interesting book. Did you guys like it? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, in general.
I wouldn't have expected to like it, because it looks like a very not serious YA book, and that's not usually what I read. Yeah. I usually read more literary fiction.
Because you wanted to have some, some kind of essence of the real life.
Yeah. And that's also because for me, I tend to read, the literary fiction works, and it's easy then to neglect the more maybe popular books among
the modern
younger people. That's also, we don't read that in literature class, because it's not the fine literature, but it's important because that's what builds the minds of the actual the majority of the people, and therefore it's important to actually look into those books as well and read them, because that's where the actual culture. It's easy to say that these like great works for the culture, but if they're not what people actually read, then you're missing out on a huge part of the culture.
Yeah. And this kind of simplifies it a lot. It breaks the problem down, which you wouldn't normally see if you just picked up, It kind of takes childhood essence and turns it into something more complex, which is really interesting.
If you read books like those philosophical literature works, like the ones that you read in a literature class, you miss out on the messages that the ordinary people get.
No,
and
so
I think
it's
that's
so
unfortunate.
Easy, and it's also so easy to read just like academic books.
Yeah.
Just like, okay, so this happens, this hormone is, but like when you read these kinds of novels, you get to see the effect that it has on the actual person in which it's happening. It's easy to say, you have symptoms of this and that. But when you actually see how they come into play and how they can actually, how they can, ruin relationships and lead to substance abuse, you have to see that correlation in between that.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to our book discussion about The Magician. And the next book that we'll be discussing would be The Power, written by Naomi Alderman. Stay tuned.